so much to so many.
We don't believe she was moving around the home. We believe everything transpired in the bedroom.
On August 22nd, 2025, in Lanham, Maryland, 19-year-old Dacara Rose Thompson, a girl from a good family, got into a car in the middle of the night with a 35-year-old undocumented immigrant from Guatemala named Hugo Rene Hernandez-Mendez. She did this on her own. Nobody forced her. There was no struggle, no screaming, no attempt to get away. Not long after, her naked body was found on a riverbank. From that moment, this stops being just a tragedy and becomes a mystery. One where every new detail raises a dozen more questions. Who were these two people to each other? A young high school graduate with her whole future ahead of her, and a man nearly twice her age who'd been living in the country illegally for years. Did they know each other beforehand? Or was this a chance encounter in the middle of the night with a total stranger? But the biggest question, the one this entire case revolves around, is this. What actually connected 19-year-old Dacara Thompson to a 35-year-old undocumented immigrant, and why did she willingly get into his car?
Georges County and Maryland State Police today telling us they had other surveillance video from the time of her disappearance showing Dacara willingly getting into a dark SUV.
Dacara Rose Thompson was born August 8, 2006. She was the youngest of 5 kids, the baby of the family, the one who usually gets extra looking after from older siblings. She stood about 5 feet 2, weighed somewhere around 105 pounds, had black hair, brown eyes, a nose piercing, and tattoos on her right side and left arm. Tattoos that would later become one of the ways investigators identified her. She went to St. Charles High School in Waldorf. During those years, she played sports and was part of the Marine Corps Youth Program, an organization that builds discipline, physical fitness, and a sense of duty in teenagers. That's not a typical choice for a girl her age, but according to people who knew her, it fit her perfectly. Organized, driven, comfortable with structure. After graduating, Dacara didn't put life on hold. She enrolled in the Maryland Service Year Option, a state program that lets young people spend a year serving their community instead of jumping straight into college or a regular job. Through that program, she worked with a nonprofit in Prince George's County, spending months helping local residents with all kinds of needs. She had a clear goal for her future. She wanted to serve in the U.S. Air Force.
And I want that to ring home to all of you, that this is a good young woman who wanted to do good for her community.
For someone who'd already gone through the Marine Corps Youth Program and a year of public service, joining the Air Force was the natural next step, moving from school discipline and community work into an actual military career. But Dacara wasn't the stiff, all-business type you might picture from that resume. Her mother described her as social, quiet, and kind, a free spirit.
Yes, my daughter, she had just turned 19 years old.
She loved pink, loved glitter, loved anything girly, and none of that clashed with her discipline from the Junior Marine Corps. The two sides of her just coexisted. By every account, she was just as comfortable in uniform during training as she was hanging out with friends talking about fashion. As of August 2025, Dacara was living with her father, Daniel Thompson, in Lanham in Prince George's County. That's everything we know about the 19 years of her life leading up to that night. Hugo Rene Hernandez-Mendez was 16 years older than Dacara. A Guatemalan citizen, he'd been living and working in the United States illegally, according to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, for more than 3 years by the time of these events. He rented a room in a house on Cambridge Drive in Bowie, sharing it with several other tenants, including his cousin. He worked for a landscaping company based in Baltimore. Physical labor, constant travel between job sites. He was driving on a DC license issued back in 2015, 10 years old, but still his main form of ID behind the wheel. His cousin, who lived in the same house, later told police he had problems with alcohol and drugs.
The suspect living with other relatives who say he has a drinking problem, a drug problem, and they say they told police they heard a woman's voice in his bedroom.
That wasn't just one relative's opinion. It lined up with official records that had been piling up for years. Back in May 2022, Hernandez-Mendez already had a DUI arrest on his record, documented by the Department of Homeland Security. At the time, it ended there. Paperwork, a fine, back to his life. Then, on April 25th, 2025, Just before 2 a.m., U.S. Park Police pulled him over on I-295 in Cheverly. The officer's report noted he was clearly unsteady on his feet and reeked of alcohol. A breathalyzer put him well over Maryland's legal limit. He walked away from that stop with 9 separate citations and was released on his own recognizance to appear in court later. ICE didn't request a detainer at the time, and his immigration status wasn't even flagged in the paperwork from that stop. Less than 4 months later, everything would change. The records and the accounts from people who knew him paint a picture of a man whose life in the US revolved around manual labor, a rented room shared with strangers, and, by every indication, ongoing alcohol problems. Problems serious enough that the system had already caught him twice, and both times sent him right back out onto the street with no real consequences. His landscaping job meant constant travel between sites, early mornings, physical demands, but it also gave him a kind of freedom during the day. He got himself to each job, sometimes in his own vehicle, sometimes a company one, and his schedule shifted a lot day to day. He had access to a car, the same black GMC Yukon Denali he apparently used not just for work, but for his personal time too, including late nights and weekends. Investigators never found any evidence that Dacara Thompson and Hugo Hernandez-Mendez knew each other before that night. That's one of the biggest open questions in this entire case, and we'll come back to it. Before we keep going, if this story has grabbed your attention, hit that like button.
He means so much to so many.
The life of 19-year-old Dacara Thompson taken.
It's a signal that stories like this need to be told. Subscribe so you don't miss the next investigation, and drop a comment. What's your take on this case? Now, let's get into it. August 22nd, 2025. Around 10 p.m., Dacara left her father's house in Lanham. She told him she was going to fill up her car. A completely routine errand, nothing that raised any concern. It was a Saturday night winding down, and a gas station run at that hour wasn't anything worth remembering in the moment. Surveillance cameras at a Shell station in the Eastgate shopping center caught her that night for the last time in her usual world, stepping out of her white 2013 Ford Edge, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. That's the last image of Dacara Thompson next to her own car. Every clip after this shows her in a different city, in different clothes, with no car in sight. Around 11:50 p.m., her father tried calling. When she didn't pick up, he texted, "I love you. I'm about to go to bed, just checking in on you." Dacara texted back almost immediately, "I just filled up and I'm on my way. I'll be there soon. Love you too. Good night." That was the last message they ever got from her. A completely ordinary bedtime exchange between a father and daughter. Short, warm, nothing to suggest anything was wrong. After that text, there's a gap in the timeline investigators were never able to close. More than 3 hours passed between that message, sent just before midnight, saying she was already heading home, and her next appearance on camera. The drive from that Shell station to her house in Lanham takes just a few minutes, not 3 hours. Where she went, who she saw, why a 5-minute drive stretched into hours. None of it has ever been pinned down. All investigators know for certain is that at some point during that gap, Dacara ended up in Hyattsville, several miles from Lanham, and her own car was already parked on a different street. At approximately 3:06 a.m. on August 23rd, security cameras picked her up again, this time on foot. Her white SUV sat parked in Hyattsville while she walked along Jasmine Terrace toward Riggs Road, continuing on toward University Boulevard. Now she was wearing a light-colored jacket, black pants, and light-colored shoes, completely different from the dark jacket and jeans she'd had on at the gas station hours earlier. Nobody has ever explained when or where she changed clothes during those missing hours. At 3 a.m., that stretch of the county is basically dead. A few passing cars, dark storefronts, empty sidewalks. Cameras along her route caught her in pieces, camera to camera, but in every single clip, she's alone. No one walking with her. Her route led to a parking lot behind a Family Dollar in the 2000 block of University Boulevard in Langley Park, a few blocks from where cameras first caught her walking that morning. That walk takes about 15 to 20 minutes, and it was in that exact parking lot that security footage captured the moment this entire case turns on. Dacara walked up to the driver's side of a black GMC Yukon Denali, talked to the man behind the wheel for about a minute, then walked around the vehicle, opened the passenger door, and climbed in. No hesitation on camera, no looking around, just a short conversation through a cracked window, and then a decision. Start to finish, from the moment she appears at the driver's door to the passenger door closing. The whole thing takes just over a minute, too short for a real conversation, long enough to change everything that came after. The SUV pulled out. According to geolocation data from Dacara's phone, Brighton Dacries and Beachav Fire some Dacries, the vehicle reached the house on the 12,000 block of Cambridge Drive in Bowie at 3:47 a.m. That's roughly a 40-minute drive from the Langley Park lot, easy at that hour with empty roads and a direct route. By the time she got to Bowie, Dacara was miles from home, miles from her car, miles from anything familiar. It was that phone data, not a witness, not a camera, that later let investigators reconstruct her route down to the minute. A digital trail that survived even where there were no cameras at all. They went inside and stayed there for over an hour. The house on Cambridge Drive is a typical suburban home, the kind you'll find all over Bowie. None of the people living there could later say what happened in Hernandez-Mendez's bedroom during that hour. That stretch, just like the earlier 3-hour gap, has no witness to it. At that hour, the street sat in its usual overnight quiet, and according to neighbors, nothing inside drew attention. Not until the sounds that came a little later. Around 5 a.m., Orado Mafanda, someone in the house, in the room next door, heard sounds consistent with sex coming from Hernandez-Mendez's room. In his own words, later recorded in court documents, it sounded like someone was not enjoying it. At the time, he didn't think much of it, just noise through a wall, the kind of thing that would have gone completely unnoticed if not for what happened next. At 5:03 a.m., Dacara's phone shut off. Investigators believe that's the moment, and that room, where the murder happened.
We don't believe she was moving around the home. We believe everything transpired in the bedroom. So what is surrounding the two coming together, that's what we're still investigating.
A neighbor named Cody, who lived about 40 feet from the Cambridge Drive house, stepped outside early that morning and noticed something burning in Hernandez-Mendez's yard. He couldn't tell exactly what it was in the dark, and at the time it barely registered, just something he happened to notice, and later remembered clearly enough to tell investigators. Another neighbor separately noted that the black SUV had disappeared from the house at an odd hour. Hernandez-Mendez didn't usually work Saturdays, so its absence that morning stuck out enough that this neighbor remembered the day distinctly, an empty spot where the car normally sat all morning. After the murder, Dacara's body was driven out to Route 50, to the stretch between the Route 424 and Route 97 interchanges near Annapolis, clear on the other side of the county from Bowie, heading toward the Chesapeake. From a short bridge there, the body was dropped more than 30 feet down into the South River. At that hour, that stretch of Route 50, far from any neighborhood, is essentially empty, and the bridge itself sits between two interchanges, nowhere anyone typically stops. The drive from Bowie to that bridge takes about half an hour. The spot where her body ended up in the water sits roughly 7 miles from the Cambridge Drive house, the place investigators believe the murder happened. Everything between Dacara getting into that SUV and the sounds a neighbor heard around 5 a.m. falls into a blank spot. No cameras, no recordings, nothing. All that's certain is the distance, the timing, and where it all ended. A riverbank 7 miles from where the night began, while whatever was burning in that yard was still smoldering, and the SUV made its way back from Route 50 to Bowie. Nobody at Daniel Thompson's house in Lanham had any idea what had happened. The father who'd sent his daughter a goodnight text would wake up that morning with no clue. And it's from that morning, from his growing confusion over why his daughter never came home, that an entirely different chapter of this story begins.
But more importantly, I want to thank this community. When you found out that Dacara Thompson was missing, you answered the calls of her parents and her family to help find her, to locate her.
One that would stretch on for 9 days. On the morning of August 23rd, Dacara never came home, and her mother, Carmen Thompson, was the first to sense something was wrong. She pulled up Find My iPhone, tracked her daughter's phone to a location, and asked Daniel to go check it out in person. For a mother who'd had no reason to worry the night before, that morning started with a slow-building dread. Her daughter, who always kept in touch, had gone silent and hadn't come home. Daniel found his daughter's car at the corner of Jasmine Terrace and Riggs Road in Hyattsville. The white SUV was parked illegally, facing the wrong direction, next to a fire hydrant, directly across from the Chilimadelphi fire station. About 9 miles from the home Dacara shared with her father, in a part of town she had no obvious reason to be in that time of night after a gas station run. That car, sitting in the wrong place at the wrong time, became the first hard piece of evidence confirming her parents' worst fears, before any crime had even officially been reported. Just before 9 p.m. that same day, August 23rd, Daniel officially reported his daughter missing to the Prince George's County Police Department. Almost 12 hours passed between finding the car that morning and filing the report that night, likely a period where the family still held out hope she'd turn up on her own before they went to police. That gap would later become part of the public conversation around this case. How much time should really have to pass before a missing adult's report gets treated as urgent, instead of something you weigh out first? On August 24th, the family went back to the car and called police again. Inside, they found her purse, $60 in cash, her driver's license, debit and credit cards, house keys. Her phone and car key fob were gone. From the moment she disappeared, there was no activity on her bank account, no activity on her phone, nothing on social media. None of the usual digital breadcrumbs that help track down a missing person ever showed up. No purchases, no app logins, no messages to friends. The fact that her phone and keys were missing, while her cash, cards, and ID sat untouched in the car, pointed investigators in a clear direction right away. If robbery had been the motive, the money and cards would have been the first things gone, not left sitting in a car for days until her family found them. Taking specifically the phone and the key fob, the two things that could reveal someone's location or let someone use the car again, suggested an effort to erase a specific trail, not a random theft. The family didn't sit around waiting on the investigation. Every night, dozens of relatives and neighbors walked through Langley Park, hung flyers on poles and in store windows, and searched the creek near the old Adelphi Mill. Carmen personally checked under manhole covers, looking anywhere she could think of. The family and community held prayer gatherings at 1820 University Boulevard, right by where the car was found. A GoFundMe went up to cover flyers, a private investigator, and lost wages for parents who'd put their regular lives on hold entirely to search. For a family where both parents had taken indefinite leave from work, that financial strain piled on top of an already unbearable emotional weight. The search kept expanding, from the streets of Langley Park to the wooded areas along the creek, from knocking on neighbors' doors to reaching out to local media. Her parents handed out flyers on the street themselves, left them in stores and cafes, hoping someone would recognize her face and remember something, anything, from that night. The prayer gatherings at their home on University Boulevard drew in neighbors who'd never even met Dacara. For that community, her disappearance became a shared wound.
This is a nice family community, and, you know, we don't have to hear about stuff like this.
For 9 days, the family lived inside that same routine, patrolling at night, calling police, waiting for any kind of news, and getting nothing. No calls from unknown numbers, no card activity, no social media activity, nothing to point them anywhere. Every night ended without an answer, and every morning started with the same unanswered question. Prince George's County Police were running their own investigation in parallel, but for all 9 days, nothing was made public. For parents combing their neighborhood every day for any scrap of a lead, that silence from police was almost harder to sit with than the uncertainty itself. On August 31st, at around 4:50 p.m., Maryland State Highway Patrol responded to a call about a stalled car on the Route 50 bridge over the South River.
On August 31st, what we believe to have been Dacara's body was located by the Maryland State Police Department.
That call had nothing to do with Dacara, just a routine roadside assist the kind troopers handle constantly. But while the trooper was working that scene, he spotted a woman's body in critical condition on the riverbank, roughly 30 feet below the bridge. It's worth pausing on just how much this discovery came down to chance. If that unrelated car hadn't broken down on that exact bridge, on that exact day, her body could have gone unfound for who knows how long. An autopsy was performed on September 1st. By then, Maryland State Police already knew about the Dacara Thompson missing persons case and reached out to Prince George's County Police to compare notes. Two separate agencies, State Highway Patrol, who found the body, and County Police, who'd been leading the search, connected their information for the first time that day, 9 days after she vanished. On September 3rd, county detectives met with the Thompson family and confirmed her identity through photographs, tattoos, and jewelry. For parents who'd never let go of hope, that was the day a search for their living daughter officially turned into a murder investigation. That same evening, around 9 p.m., detectives, already working a lead, spotted a black GMC SUV near a house on Cambridge Drive in Bowie. By this point, investigators apparently had enough to tie that specific vehicle to the Langley Park footage, and they were watching that address deliberately. Less than a day passed between confirming Dacara's identity and detectives showing up at that exact house, a fast jump from IDing a victim to zeroing in on a suspect's address. Early on September 4th, detectives came back to that house with a search warrant. Before they could execute it, they watched a man walk out of the house and get behind the wheel of that same SUV. Police stopped him on the Baltimore-Washington Parkway near Route 450. It was Hugo Rene Hernandez-Mendez, a moment that forced investigators to adjust their plan on the spot in real time. After 9 a.m., Marmabas, off the Marnia Waime, investigators searched the Cambridge Drive house and brought in several other residents for questioning. A house where neighbors had heard noise through the wall just days earlier and shrugged it off was suddenly swarming with investigators, search teams, and evidence bags. On September 5th, detectives had enough to file charges. Hernandez-Mendez was formally arrested in Bowie.
The suspect is 35-year-old Hugo Hernandez-Mendez, now facing first and second-degree murder charges.
ICE placed an immigration detainer on him, a separate legal hold that keeps him in custody, regardless of how the criminal case plays out. Even if he were released on the criminal charges, immigration authorities could still hold him on his immigration status alone. His lack of legal status, already on record from that April traffic stop, had by September 5th gone from a background detail to one of the formal grounds for keeping him locked up. The search of the Cambridge Drive house turned up key evidence. In Hernandez-Mendez's bedroom, including on the mattress, investigators found several spots of suspected blood that were later matched to Dacara. A fake fingernail with a white and pink French manicure was found on the floor, matching a nail missing from Dacara's hand. In the trash cans out in the yard, investigators found a blood-stained napkin and strands of hair matching a wig she'd been wearing in the surveillance footage. The fact that this evidence wasn't hidden, just tossed in a trash can right there on the property, suggests either panic or a serious underestimation of how fast the investigation would reach that house. Several pairs of women's underwear were also recovered from inside. A search of the GMC Yukon Denali turned up blood on the front passenger seat, the exact seat Dacara had climbed into voluntarily back in that Langley Park parking lot. Less than 2 weeks passed between her opening that car door herself and forensic investigators finding blood on that very seat. By mapping out where the evidence turned up, blood on the mattress, a torn nail on the floor, signs of a struggle in the room, investigators concluded a struggle happened in that bedroom. A torn-off fake nail isn't usually a coincidence. The adhesive holding them on is strong enough that it typically only comes loose from a sudden, forceful impact, not ordinary movement. And the fact that it turned up on the floor right next to the mattress, right where blood was also found, points to that struggle happening close to the bed, not somewhere else in the room. The autopsy found fractures to the skull and facial bones, along with injuries consistent with a fall from a significant height. The state medical examiner's office hasn't publicly released an official cause of death, but investigators have classified this as a homicide. The mix of injuries points to at least 2 separate phases of trauma. Whatever happened before she was taken to that bridge, and whatever resulted from the fall into the water. Sorting out exactly which injuries came from which phase requires a separate forensic analysis, and those results haven't been made public. Taken together, the evidence tied Hernandez-Mendez directly to the crime. He had access to the SUV caught on camera at every key point that night, and he was staying in the exact bedroom where Dacara's blood was found. During questioning, Hernandez-Mendez waived his right to stay silent, even though he could have invoked it immediately. He admitted he'd been driving the SUV on August 23rd and said he'd spent that night at the Galaxy nightclub in Hyattsville, a venue sitting directly across from where Dacara later walked into that parking lot. According to him, he'd gone there hoping to meet an ex-girlfriend who never showed. The fact that Galaxy sits right across from where Dacara was headed doesn't prove or disprove anything on its own. It just means his account is physically consistent with him being in that part of town around the same time she was. Neither prosecutors nor the defense have publicly produced anything confirming or denying whether he was actually at that club, whether this ex-girlfriend exists, or whether the meeting really fell through the way he described. When investigators' questions shifted from general whereabouts to the specifics of Dacara's death, Hernandez-Mendez denied any involvement and asked for a lawyer, and the interrogation stopped immediately. The moment he stopped cooperating lined up exactly with the moment questions moved from where he'd been that night to what actually happened to her. On September 8th, he made his first court appearance, remotely, from jail. The hearing lasted less than 5 minutes. His court-appointed public defender didn't request a separate bail hearing.
And he was again held without bond, and he will continue to be held without bond.
Judge Katina Stewart ordered him held without bail, saying that given the nature of the charges, pre-trial release wasn't on the table. In under 5 minutes, the decision was made. He'd stay locked up until trial, set for nearly a year out, with zero chance of bail before then. For comparison, hearings like this one usually run longer, mostly because of back and forth over bail conditions. Here, that discussion never really happened. On October 7th and 8th, 2025, a grand jury handed down an indictment.
In addition, this office's primary concern is not the legal status of the defendant.
The charges: common law murder, first and second degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and unlawful disposal of a body. Each charge covers a separate part of that night. Her death is the murder charge. The items burned and thrown out in the yard cover evidence tampering, and moving her body to Route 50 and dumping it off that bridge is its own separate charge, apart from the murder itself. Breaking it up this way tells you the prosecution isn't treating this as one single act, but as a chain of actions across several hours, from the killing itself to covering it up afterward. That distinction matters for the trial too. Prosecutors will have to prove several connected episodes, not just one, each with its own evidence. The defense asked to move the trial to a different county, arguing that heavy media coverage and public statements from politicians could make it impossible to find an unbiased jury in Prince George's County. Their argument leaned on the fact that this case had drawn national attention and that officials, from the prosecutor up to the governor, had already made public comments that could shape how potential jurors saw the defendant before the trial even started. Motions like this get filed often in high-profile cases, but they don't often succeed. Courts need real proof. There's nowhere else the case would get less publicity. The judge denied the motion. The trial stays in Prince George's County, the same county where Dacara lived, where her family searched for 9 days, and where she was ultimately identified. As of now, Hugo Rene Hernandez-Mendez remains in custody at the Prince George's County Department of Corrections with no right to bail. The immigration detainer placed on him the day of his arrest is still active, meaning even if something changed in the criminal case, he wouldn't walk free, since he's being held separately on immigration grounds tied to his status in the country. Trial is scheduled to start in September 2026, nearly a year after the indictment, and more than a year after the night Dacara disappeared from that Langley Park parking lot. That kind of timeline is normal for a case this size. Gathering and verifying physical evidence, running expert analysis, building witness lists, and prepping both sides takes months, even without extra motions like the one the defense already filed. For Dacara's family, that means almost another full year waiting for a jury to even look at the evidence gathered in those first weeks after she disappeared. No verdict has come down yet. Whether he's guilty, and if so, why any of this happened, that's for a jury to decide a year after his arrest. Until then, the public only has what investigators gathered, witness statements, and his own account from that one interview before he asked for a lawyer. And while everyone waits, this case has already stretched well past the courtroom. It's reshaped a family's life, shaken a county, and made its way into the offices of politicians where it isn't finished yet. Dacara Thompson's funeral was held Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025 at Kettering Baptist Church's Legacy Center on Crane Highway in Upper Marlboro, surrounded by family, loved ones, and members of the community. Viewing started at 10 a.m., the service at 11. County Council member Vanica Fisher spoke. The family redirected the money raised on GoFundMe, originally meant to fund the search and a private investigator, toward funeral costs instead. What started as an effort to bring her home alive became, instead, the way they gave her a proper send-off. In her memory, the Prince George's County Council passed what's known as the Dacara Rose Act, authored by Vanica Fisher. The law eliminates any waiting period for filing a missing person report, requires every municipal police department in the county to accept those reports immediately, and directs the Department of Health to run an awareness campaign specifically about missing Black women and girls. The council passed it unanimously, and it was signed into law in early April 2026. The Thompson family had initially hesitated to go straight to police, believing, incorrectly, that adults needed a waiting period before a missing person report could be filed. This law exists specifically to put that misconception to rest for every family in the county going forward. As Fisher put it, the law puts one simple rule into the county code. In Prince George's County, there is no waiting period. Dacara's death happened around the same time as the disappearances of two other women in the area, Erica Perry and Santia Dezia. Her case reignited a broader conversation about how little media coverage cases involving missing black women tend to get. According to National Crime Information Center data from 2022, of more than 270,000 missing women and girls reported that year, over 36% were black, even though black women make up only about 14% of the country's female population. That gap, more than double what you'd expect, became one of the driving arguments behind requiring the Department of Health to tackle this specific issue head-on. The fact that 3 young women disappeared in the same county in the same short stretch of time gave Dacara's case a bigger context, not an isolated tragedy, but part of a pattern the data had been showing for years, one that rarely gets the attention its scale deserves. There's another quieter thread to this story involving the family of Hernandez-Mendez's cousin. After his arrest, federal immigration agents came back to the Cambridge Drive house and detained her husband, also undocumented, originally from Mexico, without a warrant, according to her, even though he'd fully cooperated with the investigation and had no criminal record. She said agents never showed either of them a warrant. They just handcuffed him and took him while she stood there with her 2 young kids. It's a reminder of how far the fallout from that night reached. A family with no connection to the crime beyond sharing a roof got swept up in it anyway. 2 young children left without their father that day became another cost of that night, one that has nothing to do with Dacara directly, paid by people who had no part in what happened to her. The suspect's immigration status quickly pulled this case out of local news and into a national debate. The Department of Homeland Security criticized the county, saying it had a history of not cooperating enough with ICE. A Maryland congressman put out his own statement blaming federal immigration authorities for not detaining Hernandez-Mendez after that April DUI arrest, arguing that failure was what allowed this to happen 5 months later. Politicians on both sides used the case to push their own views on immigration policy, turning one family's personal loss into a talking point in a debate that reached well beyond Prince George's County. For the Thompson family, all of that, statements from the governor, state agencies, members of Congress, became background noise to a grief that was much more personal than any policy argument. Governor Wes Moore offered condolences, saying the whole state mourns what senseless violence took from the Thompson family.
This was someone who was in their custody, and they made the decision to release him.
County Executive Aisha Braveboy directly criticized federal authorities for releasing a man who'd already been in their custody after that April arrest, calling it a decision she believed was directly connected to what happened later. She also defended Dacara's character, calling her a good young woman who wanted to do good for her community, repeating the word 3 times, as if one wasn't enough to capture what was lost. State's Attorney Tara Jackson, for her part, said her office's focus wasn't the defendant's legal status, but holding accountable anyone who commits crimes against the people of Prince George's County.
My concern is to hold accountable people who commit crimes against the residents of Prince George's County.
The case drew coverage from local TV all the way up to major national outlets. One notable voice was Hunter Gilmore, host of the daily true crime podcast Hunting for Answers, who dedicated a special episode to Dacara's case. She talked about how, as a black woman herself, it was hard to look away from cases like this. Cases that point to a national problem, not just a series of separate tragedies. Dacara's mother, Carmen Thompson, remained the most outspoken voice for the family throughout. She said her daughter was their light and that the family wouldn't stop until justice was served. She pushed back against rumors circulating online, asking people not to believe everything they see or hear. She also tied her daughter's death directly to what didn't happen back in April, saying the family might not be in this situation if the right steps had been taken then.
I'm very disappointed, finding that out now, because we may not be here today if they did what they were supposed to do.
Later, she put it even more directly, that her goal now is making sure her daughter's death wasn't for nothing, and that the Thompson family is a victim here seeking justice, not revenge. Her father, Daniel Thompson, kept his words simple from the very start. He just wanted his daughter to come home. That phrase, said in the earliest days of the search when the family still didn't know what had happened, took on an entirely different weight once her body was found. A wish that never got fulfilled the way it was meant. Dacara's aunt, Danica Robinson, spoke at one of the hearings about those first few hours after her disappearance, stressing that no family should hesitate to ask for help because those early hours matter most. She recalled that before police were fully involved, the family had been searching on their own, an experience that became part of the argument for requiring missing person reports to be accepted immediately, no matter the person's age. A lot about this case is still unresolved. Investigators never determined whether Dacara and Hernandez-Mendez knew each other before that night. No official motive has ever been released. Neither investigators nor prosecutors have said why she ended up in that Langley Park parking lot, or exactly what happened between her getting into that car and the sounds a neighbor heard hours later. The official cause of death from the autopsy has never been made public, even though the nature of her injuries, skull and facial fractures, trauma consistent with a fall, came out early, during the search of the house. It's also still unclear why ICE didn't request Hernandez-Mendez's detention back in April, when he was already in local police custody after that traffic stop. That single missed step, an arrest that could have happened 5 months earlier, has become the center of the political fight around this case, and the main point of criticism from both the family and county officials aimed at federal immigration authorities. Sources also don't always agree on specific dates in this case, which says something about just how slowly and messily the full picture came together, even after a suspect was already in custody. Dacara Thompson dreamed of serving in the US Air Force. She never got the chance. Instead, her name is now written into county law, a law meant to spare other families from what her parents went through in those first hours and days after she vanished. Her dream of serving her country stayed just that, a dream. But her name now serves the county in a different way, through the language of a law instead of the uniform she wanted to wear. Legally, the case is still open. The defendant is awaiting trial. Her family is still waiting for answers the investigation hasn't been able to give them.
When you found out that Dacara Thompson was missing, you answered the calls of her parents and her family to help.
But the community remembers the name Dacara Rose Thompson, a 19-year-old girl who didn't deserve what happened to her. Could the justice system have stopped this if it had made a different call 5 months earlier? That April night when Hugo Rene Hernandez-Mendez was pulled over for drunk driving and simply sent home.